Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, the show about hot takes hotter than pancakes. I'm your host, Chris Conkling. Whoa!
Hey,
what's that?
Hey,
how's it going,
guys?
Oh my gosh!
Not much. I just wanted to crash your little podcast, your little stupid podcast you got going on here.
Oh yeah.
To let you know, Chris, I'm ripping the reins back.
You can have them. Take the baton now.
You've been dying for it.
I was checking out our numbers. They're not looking great, all right? And I'm not going to blame you, but I do think that we got to add a little bit of spice back into life. So
sprinkle in a little Katie spice.
Dune spice. I've been to Dune and back for the spice, and I'm coming to bring it back to the podcast. No, I'm excited. You've been doing a great job, Chris and Brian.
Thanks, man.
But I just want to let all our loyal listeners know who are probably like, God, this show's missing something, and I don't know what.
Christian, I'm going to be honest with you. My good friend David, loyal listener from early on,
has stopped listening because you left.
He hasn't stopped listening, but he literally told me just this week that the show isn't the same without you here. There is something missing.
It's not.
People love a mess. People love a calamity. What can I say? That's what I bring to the table. But I appreciate all the time off, and thanks, loyal listeners, for the time off. You know, Chris, I know under contract you made me prove that I made a baby. And this
you have to show it to us.
Oh, this is bad. It was almost a miracle. This is a real baby. It looks like a prop baby.
On cue. He is ready to pod. Look at this man.
Look at him.
Yeah, he's gonna be the new host. So I hope you're ready. I just want to say my replacement, my son, the heir to the Pop-O-Holics throne.
He looks like he's ready to take over.
He's ready for his close-up.
One of those.
He looks like Vin Diesel.
Maybe simultaneous.
My child came out and was like, family. And we're very excited. He's very cute. River Katie. And so I will try to balance working a full-time job and this podcast and a baby. And it should be good because I have a great partner. A shout out to my fiance. She's amazing, incredible. That's going to help make it happen. But I'll let you get on with your pod. You guys are starting your Easter Eggers month.
We are indeed. You better get those shorts. Make sure you and your newborn son watch these very inappropriate shorts for a child.
Do you want to watch Hansel and Gretel? Nah, he's good. Yeah, we can't watch Batman yet. I'm a little sad about how long I'm have to wait to watch Batman. I tried to put it on and he was just like, and pooped, and then was like, I'm hungry.
He's a tough critic.
He'll
be perfect. He'll be perfect.
It's a tough nut to crack, for sure. All right, gentlemen. Well, you have an awesome rest of your pod. Sorry to barge in, but excited to see you. As you can see, I got a little new setup going on too. We had to move some stuff around. That's where the baby diaper gets changed. So, lots have changed over here in Katie.
Well, that throne.
It looks great. We can't wait to have you back next week, bro.
It's covered in pee. It's covered in pee.
As any good throne is.
As any good throne is. All right, I'm heading out though. I got to put this baby down.
Take it easy.
Thanks for stopping by, man.
To sleep. Put him down to sleep.
Yeah, we got that. We assumed.
Good.
Bye. That was our returning host, Christian Katie. We are so excited to have him back next week, along with a special guest for our Witch review. The Witch from Robert Eggers. Susan Tekla Kruglinska will be returning to the podcast. She was a guest a long time ago. But, we've done a lot of talking here without really saying, what is Pop-O-Holics? Pop-O-Holics is a show where myself and my team meet every single week, twice a week, to firstly cover all of Hollywood news and pop culture news on Mondays. And then on Wednesdays, we typically theme our episodes around something that's coming up in pop culture. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about The Witch next week from Robert Eggers because we are celebrating the release of his newest film coming out this month, The Northman. But you've already seen him talking to Christian. I've yet to introduce him. I'm not by myself. I'm also joined by one of my best friends, Mr. Brian Dupree. How you doing, Brian?
I am doing well. Just got finished with officially a move from my previous residence. It's been a bit of a stressful and long week, but very glad to be done with it. And yeah, I'm hanging in there. Hopefully my audio is slightly better this week, and it will only get better with time from here, having mic issues, as the listeners know. But how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I said I was a little tired last week. I've gotten a little more sleep this week. I'm feeling a little bit better. I'm ready to podcast with you. Brian, lately we've been starting off the show talking about some of the things we've been consuming over the course of the week. Have you been reading or watching anything cool this week outside of, all the moving that you've been doing?
Well, Chris, funny that you mentioned that. I brought it up briefly last week that I was reading Alan Moore's Providence. So this is a 12-issue comic written by Alan Moore and drawn by Jason Burrows. And it is both a sequel and a prequel to two of his previous works that are inspired by the Cthulhu mythos.
Pulling double duty.
I can't get too deeply into it, but Alan Moore, he has a certain understanding of time that may not be typical. So, yes, this is the third in his series of stories exploring the Cthulhu mythos of H.P. Lovecraft. And it follows our main character, who is a journalist in New York for the Herald. And he basically starts investigating the occult traditions of New England and gets swept up into this cult that is built around this ancient Arab alchemical text that is, I think, similar to the Neonomicon, but kind of inspired by it. H.P. Lovecraft is a character within the context of this story as well, so the Neonomicon also exists. This has been absolutely revelatory for me. I'm going through a bit of a dream renaissance myself, and this was the perfect time for me to pick this back up. It's inspirational, not only in its concepts and its themes and what it's exploring, but also just walking through different types of methods to dream and to get into different states of lucid dreaming and what that can mean. I can't really say too much about the plot of this without getting into spoilers, but it is absolutely mind-blowing and incredible. I will say it's adult. It is a bit graphic at times, so not for children. But if you are at all interested in H.P. Lovecraft, if you know of Alan Moore and are interested in him, I cannot recommend this book highly enough. It has been consistently blowing my mind and slightly ruining my sleep schedule. But it's incredible. That the last two issues, I will say, they just, similar to the end of another of his longer runs, he did a comic called Promethea that's also incredible. The end of them are kind of similar, like nearly like world shattering. What the hell is actually going on? Hopping through time, and I'm gonna read about this for a long time afterwards. But it's incredible, and yeah, I can't recommend it highly enough. That's Providence by Alan Moore and Jason Burrows.
Brian, it's interesting that you've been reading Providence because I'm sure our loyal listeners know, we told them last week, the first episode of Moon Knight dropped this week. And in a similar vein, while not as Lovecraftian as Providence, it is dealing with kind of dreamscapes. And of course, our lead Moon Knight has dissociative personality disorder. So there are huge swaths of time that just disappear from the main character that the first episode focuses on, Stephen Grant. And what I really liked about this first episode is that aspect that it is kind of following one of Moon Knight's personalities over the course of the first hour. So there's a lot of stuff where we don't really know what's going on. This character's, like I said, moving through time and ending up in circumstances where he has absolutely no idea how he got there or how he did what he did. Days are disappearing from him because obviously other personalities are taking over and doing things without him knowing. But honestly, I'm so pleased with the way this first episode of Moon Knight turned out. It is super different from anything we've seen from Marvel so far. A couple weeks ago, I was saying that, people who had seen the show already were saying that this was probably going to be one of the more brutal ventures in the MCU. And I have to say, while there's not a ton of that in the first episode, there are inklings of what we might get in the future. So, Brian, I think this show is actually going to be right up your alley, especially with what you've been consuming as of late. I don't want to go into too many details about it. I didn't mention this. It stars Oscar Isaac as our lead character, Moon Knight, as well as a couple other people. Ethan Hawke is playing potentially the antagonist of the show. Who's to say at this point in time? But the first episode was a lot of fun, and Oscar Isaac is doing a lot of interesting things with his performance with this character, and I can't wait to see what the rest of the show has to deliver. So I'm excited for you to watch it and, you know, tell our listeners and viewers what you think about it, because I think you'll have an interesting take on it.
Oh, I'll definitely be checking that out this weekend. I've just been too busy to catch it this week. But is there only one episode out right now?
Only
Just
one
the first?
episode so
Okay.
far. And then the next one, of course, will be coming out this Wednesday.
Okay.
But with that, we're going to jump right into Brian's Wacky News Corner. We got a lot to talk about. The Oscars happened last week.
Oh, did they?
And we're going to dive into it.
Welcome back, everyone. So, as Chris said, we are starting with the Oscars, the 2022 Oscars, the Academy of Arts and Sciences. They made some changes. We formed a whole corner of the podcast to just express our grievances for them. And looking back, we could not have possibly predicted what this night actually would end up becoming and the memorable moments for it. I'm going to quickly run through most of the big awards here very quickly, and then we're going to get into some discussion about the ceremony itself and any awards that we were excited to see. So Jenny Beavan won costume design for Cruella. Definitely a very worthy win. The costumes were some of the best elements of that movie. I actually quite enjoyed it, and it was just gorgeous consistently throughout. Dune came through with a bunch of awards. A lot of them were edited into the show, as we discussed. A lot of the 8 of the total awards were done before the ceremony and edited into the broadcast. And honestly, I think it worked out okay, although I would have rather had that than some of the stuff that was added to the broadcast, and we can get into that afterwards. But Dune won for visual effects, it won for sound, it won for production design, it won for cinematography and film editing, as well as Best Original Score from Hans Zimmer. A ton of awards for Dune. Nearly every single person shouted out Denis Villeneuve and how integral he was to this movie being what it was.
And yet, no Best
director.
Director nom.
I know.
What happened?
It's a shame. But Fraser for cinematography is definitely a worthy win as well. He's been doing some incredible work lately. Billie Eilish and Phineas won Best Original Song for No Time to Die, which they had previewed they played for the first time 2 years ago at the Oscars. A very surreal moment for them to re-perform that and then win for it. But honestly, I think a worthy win because it's one of my favorite Bond songs of all time.
Agreed.
Just really powerful, and the way it's used in the movie is absolutely exceptional. Best Original Screenplay went to Belfast, Kenneth Branagh.
His first
This is
Oscar.
a weird one. Not his first nomination, but his first win. This feels like maybe kind of a lifetime award. I'm not sure the screenplay for Belfast. I'm not going to trash the category or trash it. I enjoyed this movie. I didn't think it wasn't one of my best of the year, even though I thought it was quaint and sweet. The screenplay is not what stood out to me about this movie, but Kenneth Branagh, I'm happy to see him having finally gotten an award after a decent amount of noms. Adapted screenplay went to Sean Hayter for Coda, which also ended up winning Best Picture, which was wild. And Apple picked this up at Sundance for, I believe, $30 million, the highest any movie had been purchased for out of Sundance. And this honestly seems like they got a steal for what this looks like, having this on their service. First big purchase like this, first real attempt at going for the Oscars. This movie felt like it came out, was talked about for a bit, had a little controversy surrounding it, some potentially valid criticism of it that I had heard, and a lot of people who loved it. And then I didn't hear anything about it for 6 months. And then the last few months, it really started picking up steam again. And I'm not sure how this happened. It felt kind of natural, and it just really came back and ended up winning for adapted screenplay and Best Picture. So I actually haven't seen this movie yet. So it's...
Sorry to jump in here, Brian. And you kind of briefly touched on it, but you didn't flat out say it, which is this is the first streaming film to win an Oscar. And this is something that Netflix has been gunning for the last couple of years.
Spent hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yes.
Trying.
And yet here comes Apple with I mean, they've only been a service for 2 years at this point, and
2 or 3 years, yeah.
they just reached over and grabbed the trophy right away from Netflix.
This may be the first movie that premiered at Sundance to win an Oscar as well. So Apple just really hitched their cart to the right horse with
Agreed.
this. And on top of that, Troy Kotsur, the first deaf actor to win an Oscar as well in a supporting role for Coda as well, which is really exciting. His speech was really great as well. I will say the fact that the Oscars only had ASL translation for the Coda noms
made no sense.
It was a ridiculous oversight. That was, I would not be surprised if many people were understandably offended by this, because it seemed pretty absolutely offensive and just silly.
I'm sure.
So moving on from that, we have one of the awards that everyone assumed was locked in, Ariana DeBose getting supporting role as an actress in West Side Story. She was a clear standout in this movie, absolutely unbelievable, and gave an excellent speech as well. We have animated feature film for Encanto. We got a song version of We Don't Talk About Bruno with
Megan Thee Stallion, right?
With Megan Thee Stallion
rapping about the Oscars as they're unfolding.
Disney just absolutely out of their mind with power right now, out of control. This is on top of a Buzz Lightyear trailer that was shown. Just unbelievable levels of like, we get it, you own ABC, all right. Documentary feature, which we will definitely get back to, kind of overshadowed by what took place leading up to it, but Summer of Soul, Questlove winning for Summer of Soul, a movie that probably still hasn't been watched as much as it should. It's on Hulu, I believe. Definitely up there, one of my favorite films of last year, especially as documentaries, largely footage from this event that was similar to how the Beatles Get Back. Peter Jackson took all this footage that was originally going to be a TV show or a movie and re-edited it into this, decades later. There's so much incredible content over the course of Summer of Soul, and if you haven't seen it, definitely check that out on Hulu right now. A very worthy win for documentary feature. I will say it was a bit unfortunate that Flea was nominated for 3 awards and didn't win any of them. Flea is also an excellent documentary. That's also an animated film that is very relevant right now, and very beautiful film that I think is important as well. Drive My Car for international feature film. This seemed like a lock, even though Worst Person in the World, which I'm not sure ended up winning any awards, even though I've heard a lot of great things about The Worst Person in the World. Drive My Car, I was able to see this one. It's streaming on HBO right now. Is it HBO?
I would have to. I think it is HBO Max. I think you're right. I think it is.
Okay,
HBO Max.
I think it's on HBO Max. It's a really beautiful story about a playwright dealing with grief and trauma that he's been through while working through a Chekhov play. It's got a lot to dig into, and it's a really beautiful and moving film. Jane Campion won for Best Director for The Power of the Dog. I really like this movie. It wasn't in my top 5 or 10 for the year, but I definitely understand why people enjoyed this one. I've seen it twice now, and I think it's the kind of movie that definitely rewards multiple viewings with the twists and turns that it makes. This one is available on Netflix as well, so they did get this director nom at least. Jane Campion, it's beautifully directed, I will say, and I need to go back and watch her previously nominated film, The Piano, which I've heard is incredible as well. Then moving on to actress in a leading role, this I was a bit surprised by, but honestly, I think this is a really worthy win for Jessica Chastain for The Eyes of Tammy Faye. This movie kind of got trashed a bit because of the makeup and things like that. And I'll say the first time I saw the trailer, I was a little skeptical of it myself. But when I saw it, I was really moved by her performance, and I wasn't really familiar with these characters. Neither of them are undeniably good people, but there are elements of them that are understandable and really quite moving, especially with Tammy Faye's character and her sympathy for people with AIDS as a Christian in a time when people were not at all sympathetic to people with AIDS, and also the LGBTQ community in a time when her husband was very much in a world that was completely against this.
Right.
And there's a lot of stuff in this movie that I won't get into as well that has to do with that. But if you haven't seen this, Chastain's incredible. Andrew Garfield's playing against her. He's really good in it as well. And not the best movie of the year by any stretch, but her performance is undeniably worthy of recognition here. Will Smith won for King Richard. This is another one where I think he did great in the role. It wasn't in my top 10 or really top 20 for the year, but it's a solid sports movie. This award is caught up in so much baggage that we will get into after I get to the last award. But Will Smith, someone who has had multiple nominations, has been entertaining us in incredible films, blockbusters, and dramas alike for many decades. And, I grew up with this guy. Men in Black was one of my go-tos as a kid, as well as The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He has been with me, Independence Day, just so many movies throughout the course of my life that Will Smith has been in, similar to many people in the United States. So we'll get into the situation around his award in just a minute. And as I said, Coda won Best Picture. So I already talked about that a little bit. All right, Chris. So describe to me your Oscars experience. I want to say you started texting me like halfway into the Oscars. Were you watching it at some point before that?
I started watching it about halfway through.
Okay.
Mostly, and we've had conversations here on the podcast over the last couple of weeks about like our Oscar experiences in the past and how long it's been since we've watched and stuff like that. My wife and I haven't had cable for years at this point. However, halfway through the ceremony, I remembered that we had purchased basic cable, so when my parents come to visit us, they can like watch the news and the Weather Channel and stuff like that if they want to. So immediately, as soon as I realized that, I turned to ABC and I was like, "We're watching the Oscars," and I have to say, it felt good. It kind of felt like coming home in a way initially, because the Oscars used to be such a big deal. And I've spoken about this before, but in college, it was almost like the Super Bowl. Being film students, we would sit down together and we would get drinks and food and we would watch the Oscars and, make predictions and stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun. And this is actually the first time my wife has actually watched the Oscars, which is another interesting aspect of how things unfolded over the course of the night.
Wow.
But initially it felt good. There was a nostalgia there.
I think you came on right around the time of the Encanto remix, which
it was like 2 awards prior to that.
Okay. Cool.
But yeah, right around the time of them performing We Don't Talk About Bruno live. I don't really even know if you can call that We Don't Talk About Bruno, but that's neither here nor there. What was your experience like watching this year's Oscars, Brian?
So I first want to shout out the digital antenna because I bought this thing for $20 or $25 about 6 months ago, and it's a one-time purchase. As long as you have a cable jack, you can get free cable forever with this digital antenna. So I was able to watch the Super Bowl largely without any issues, and the Oscars, which are the 2 main things that I watch on cable throughout the course of any given year. So I just want to shout out digital antennas, something that I didn't really know about until the last year or two, and feels like more people should know about these because they're just incredible. But I started watching probably off and on for a couple hours before the ceremony. So I was watching the red carpet, seeing all the interviews, seeing all the beautiful clothing and everything. My good friend Peter came over about 30 or 40 minutes before the ceremony proper started. And I was in the middle of my move and stayed up too late this night, but I couldn't not watch the Oscars. I had been working so hard all weekend. I was like, I need to do this. And then I got like 4 hours of sleep that night afterwards. But, for the most part, at the beginning, it was, the Oscars are always kind of cringy to me, even though I enjoy them. There's times where I almost have fun being like, all right, play them off like this is enough. Cut this speech short. They said their piece.
So interesting that you bring that up, because the first time that they played somebody off while Mickey and I were watching the performance, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that Mickey and I have been rewatching Curb Your Enthusiasm. And in the most recent season of Curb Your Enthusiasm, one of the bits is that Larry David has downloaded the Oscar music on his phone, the playoff music that they use when somebody's speaking for too long.
Incredible.
And he'll use it in everyday life, and people will just walk away from him. And it's this like
they
new
start
magic
talking
power.
faster and be like, "Oh yeah, it's been great. I'm sorry."
Yes, but it's this like new magic power that he's found. And because my wife and I have been watching that, she recognized what the music was and she started laughing at it. And we had this really awesome moment together of like, I don't know, it's just hilarious. I agree with you. It's funny when they have to shoo these people off the stage.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I had a great time. And then most of the awards, this was last year was the most I've ever watched movies in my entire life, especially new movies. So this was the first year that I had pretty much seen almost everything that was nominated, which was good and bad because, I kind of felt like I knew what should win, but knew what would win at the same time. So there weren't any huge surprises here. I was a little disappointed with the way that so many of Dune's awards, Dune really swept this thing in a huge way. And it didn't feel that way while watching it. Really, just because of the editing in,
It pulled a Lord of the Rings this year.
It really did.
Except it
really
didn't win Best Picture.
Yeah, but I honestly, personally understand that. I wouldn't have voted for it for my Best Picture, but yeah, so that was a little disappointing to me that that didn't happen. And then there was just one of the most surreal moments of television that I've ever seen that happened. And well, before I get to that, one of the issues that I had with the editing in, because I appreciate that it still largely showed the speeches. We didn't have any presenters for the awards, the 8 that they did beforehand. One of the things that kind of was, I will admit, it was partially my fault for being on Twitter a little bit and seeing some of the discourse as it was happening live. But 2 or 3 awards were spoiled for me on Twitter prior to them being announced live.
Just from someone being in the auditorium and having already seen it?
Yeah, exactly. So that was a bit of a bummer. And the timing of it, there was a couple of times when I looked down, see it, and then the award comes up. So it was a little bit of a bummer on that. But yeah, it seemed to take the wind out of Dune's sail a little bit. And then we get to the moment that has overshadowed the rest of the entire Oscars.
And just to be clear, the moment you're talking about is Flash entering the Speed Force, winning the best cheer moment of like the last couple of decades. That's the moment you're talking about?
Did I or did I not say the Snyder Bros were going to I called this. I didn't call the moment exactly, but I knew the Snyder Bros were going to just absolutely wreck these Twitter categories.
Kudos to you, Brian. I will give you all the kudos in the world. I underestimated, which I shouldn't have, the power of the Snyderverse followers and the tool that they use most, Twitter.
Yes, they wield it well, for better and for worse.
Yeah, but no, the moment that we're actually talking about was the slap heard round the world.
My God,
I'll let you go into details.
Or not heard around the world, at least in the US.
Well, at least in the United States. Internationally, it was heard everywhere.
Apparently, everyone in the theater heard it because it was quite loud. But yes, this is another thing. I went to Twitter afterwards to see like what's happening. But Chris Rock is presenting for Best Documentary Feature, which Summer of Soul ultimately took. And as you'd expect from Chris Rock, he starts doing jokes. A little bit of context here. In 2015 or 2016.
2016.
In 2016, when Will Smith was nominated for Concussion, or was he not? I apologize. My research is it's failing me at the moment. But Chris Rock, Will and Jada were not at the ceremony this year, and Chris Rock did jokes about Jada had started justifiably, to a large degree, the Oscars So White campaign, which I will say since then, the Oscars have gone out of their way to make their the members of the Academy more diverse and inclusive. And it's absolutely showed in some of the things that have been nominated, some years more than others. But I think they are taking steps in the right direction. And that has formed a conversation that is long overdue in terms of the old white maleness of the Oscars and how that affects what movies win these awards and get recognition.
Right.
Chris Rock goes on to make some actually undeniably hilarious jokes about her not actually being invited. I believe he says something like, boycotting the Oscars is like me boycotting Rihanna's panties. I'm not invited, or something like that, right. Which is hilarious.
What he said was he was poking fun at Jada because she was currently on a TV show, and he said that, you know, an actress or actor working on a TV show boycotting the Oscars is like him boycotting Rihanna's panties. He wasn't invited.
Right. And goes on to lightly criticize how much money Will Smith made for Wild Wild West, which was something like $20 million or something like that. So I'm not sure if there's more to it than that, but I think there's been a little bit of bad blood since then, that they took that a little bit personally.
The three of them have worked together on multiple occasions over the course of their careers. So they have a long relationship and history between them.
So we get to this night when there have already been a couple of jokes made about Will and Jada throughout the course of the night, who they're sitting in the front row. This is kind of comes with the territory at the Oscars. You know that people are going to get made fun of. Jake Gyllenhaal, they made an incest joke about him and his sister. I think Amy Schumer made a joke about them sleeping together or something. And Gyllenhaal was just confused. He seemed to be like maybe slightly offended, but more confused about like, what is this joke even? But long story short, Chris Rock, and it's still unclear what he knew about Jada Pinkett Smith's health conditions, which she has been open about suffering with alopecia and losing her hair, at least in parts. So she decided recently and publicly to shave her head to avoid it being as obvious or noticeable, because she's going to be continuing losing her hair because of this alopecia. And he made a G.I. Jane 2 joke. Ridiculously not topical. It seemed to play decently well in the crowd, even maybe with Will himself.
Will was laughing
before it set in.
He noticed that his wife was very displeased.
Yes. And he stormed the stage and smacked Chris Rock in the face. In the moment, we were just like, what just happened? Like, is this a skit? Is this a sketch?
Yeah, while we were watching it, I initially thought it was a bit. And then as soon as ABC cut audio, I was like, oh, this is not a bit. And I immediately went to Twitter.
And we see Will Smith, who's mouthing, you can't hear him, but you know exactly what he's saying when he says, keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth.
Right.
2 times. And
I just want to say, Lupita Nyong'o's reaction behind him is fantastic.
Incredible.
She's like, what is happening right now?
It was absolutely incredible. The one thing, having rewatched it a couple of times to see, like, is this an open face slap? Did he actually slug him in the face, like full fist? And then eventually seeing the unedited one from outside the US where they don't have the time delay, I guess. I can't help but notice one of the funniest moments of it for me. And this is, I don't want to get into the question of morals around this, really. I think Will Smith probably regrets this on some level. Especially given the fact that 40 minutes later, he had to give an acceptance speech, although he seemed to justify his actions a little bit, which felt very uncomfortable. Although from what I've heard, it seems like kind of similar to what he's been saying in his other acceptance speeches, because he did win other awards for this performance. So I do want to say as well, he did apologize publicly online after this, and I'm sure we know that he regrets his actions now and has apologized publicly to Chris Rock. But what I wanted to bring up, which was just hilarious to me, when Will Smith's storming the stage and Chris Rock doesn't know what's going to happen, he calls him Richard.
Oh, here comes Richard.
I was just dying. I was like, oh no, that was just the icing on the cake. Just to be like, oh yeah, now he's definitely gonna slap the shit out of him. Sorry. So that was a clumsy introduction to this, but how are you feeling in the moment?
Like I said, it was incredibly surreal watching it live because you could see everybody trying to deal with it in real time, which was very interesting and unsettling as well. And when I say unsettling, what I mean is, and Brian already mentioned this moment, you know, Will was allowed to stay in the auditorium after assaulting Chris Rock, which is illegal, you know. And then his acceptance speech and the standing ovation and the way the Academy handled it in the moment and the way all of his peers were acting. The unsettling part was that the entire ceremony was essentially gaslighting the world into thinking that maybe this didn't just happen. It was just so bizarre how everybody was just kind of totally ignoring what had just transpired.
It may have happened less as well. I can't remember if we talked about this, but they were still doing like cuts, reaction shots to him laughing after this had happened. And that was the part where I was just like, what in the actual hell is going on here?
Yeah,
like
Mickey and I noticed that they were cutting to Will and Jada less after the incident.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's true.
Where they had been cutting to them a lot prior to the incident. Because, I mean, he was up for a huge nomination, you know, like best leading actor. It's a big deal. You know, I would say it's one of the top 3 biggest awards that the Academy gives out during the Oscars.
And it felt like a lock. Like, from the awards leading up to it, it felt like people knew he was going to win this.
So all I'll say is that, you know, I absolutely don't think that what happened in that moment is representative of the type of person that Will Smith is. I honestly think that he just gave into his emotions. You know, he was incredibly upset at what Chris had said about his wife, which any of us would be if our wives were insulted in that manner.
Right.
But I think he let his emotions get the better of him and neglected to remember that he was at a business function, you know, and he just ran with it. So, you know, he's already made an apology. We'll see what the Academy does from this point going forward. They've said that they are kind of consulting with each other to see what the repercussions of this incident are going to be and whether that means a suspension of his membership for the next however much time, couple of years, couple of months, we don't know yet.
They're
or
like, we did get 5 million more viewers than last year. So what are we going to do here?
Yeah. Or, you know, they're considering an expulsion. I don't think that's going to be the way that they end up going. But what a bizarre viewing experience. I'll just say that.
It truly was. And just to wrap it up, ABC or the Academy or both decided to cut 8 awards to put in a bunch of Disney plugs. And
the show ended up being 45 minutes longer than it was supposed to be.
Still longer than the last 2 or 3 years of the shows that had all of the awards live. So just clearly bad faith arguments there in terms of their justification for cutting the awards. But that was the 2022 Oscars. If you haven't seen these movies that are nominated, I don't know. I've heard conflicting views about this, but I think 2021 was an incredible year for movies. I'm not sure all the best movies were nominated. Some of my favorites, The Green Knight and Come On, Come On, got kind of snubbed in terms of the conversation. But, you know, this is all personal preference, and there's so much great stuff out there. So definitely check out all these. I'll definitely be checking out Coda at some point soon. All right. Ending on a bit of a down note in terms of the news proper here. Bruce Willis, his family has announced that he's retiring from acting following being diagnosed with a condition called aphasia. So this is a language disorder that's caused by brain damage that affects a person's ability to communicate. We had actually in our group chat shared an article that went around. It was a couple of months ago, I think the Razzies had given him some sort of award, and the Razzies is just kind of, you know, a mean-spirited award about for
Yeah.
like worst performances, and then it came out that Bruce Willis's health may be deteriorating in some way, and they ended up taking this back. And now it's become official. The family's put out a statement that you can read in the article that we shared here, that he's stepping back from acting. And I just have to say, Bruce Willis is another one who he is such a huge action star that I grew up with. My dad is a big fan of Die Hard. This is one of the movies that we watched together growing up. I was actually able to show my dad Pulp Fiction, which is now one of his favorite movies, and he keeps trying to push for it at movie night, for our family movie night, which makes me really happy. We covered that on the podcast. We've also covered him in 12 Monkeys, which is definitely one of my favorite performances that he's ever given, doing some stuff that you really don't see often. Maybe most famous for being on Moonlighting originally on TV, as well as a few other TV shows. His movies have grossed over $5 billion worldwide. Undeniable Hollywood icon and legend. So, our thoughts are with him and his family, and it's totally understandable in this situation to step back and spend the time that you have at the most capacity that you can with your family, with the ones you love. He's given us so many great performances, and a lot of people, he's in a lot of lower tier movies these days that maybe aren't as widely viewed, but he's given us so many classics. He's undeniably going to be remembered for the great stuff that he's done, and not the stuff later in his career that is maybe considered lesser. So thoughts on Bruce Willis, Chris?
I agree with you, Brian. I think it's important for them to recognize his current condition, and stepping away is probably the best choice that they could potentially make, because going forward, if he were to continue working in this state, he would become a liability on set, and not only to himself, but to others. So
Right.
Taking this retirement and spending more time with his family, I think, is the best option at this point in time. And like you said, he's given us so many classic films and been in so many classic roles. I haven't been a huge fan of his. I would say probably like after Looper. But
he was great in Looper, though.
Still, Die Hard, Unbreakable, everything that Brian mentioned, The Sixth Sense, like he's been in so many iconic films, and it was a career well served, so I don't think he should feel like ashamed in any capacity for the work that he's done over the course of his career. I think he's done a lot of excellent things, and I think he should just spend time with his family at this point.
Yeah,
it's a good choice.
It's definitely deserved it. So Bruce Willis has retired from acting. Moving into some stuff that's coming out this week. The first thing, we have a new Netflix comedy special coming out this Tuesday, the 5th. Ronnie Chieng, Speakeasy. So in this, the comic shares his rage at online critics, gratitude for nerds, bewilderment with irrational skeptics, and unique cures for racism. So Ronnie Chieng is the senior correspondent on The Daily Show, and he's done a lot of good work on that show. Not something that I have watched relatively recently, but I know he's done good work from when I was watching that show. I haven't seen his first special. I believe this is his second special for Netflix.
It is.
Have you seen the first one, and are you looking forward to watching this one?
Brian, I cannot wait for this second special. His first special, Asian Comedian Destroys America, I talked about it here on the podcast, I believe, in 2019. It's so interesting where that special lies, because it's pre-pandemic, and everything that he was talking about at the time seems like problems that were so distant from us at this point in time.
A whole other world.
There's so many bits in that special that absolutely slay me and make so much sense. That he has a great bit about consumption and excess, and he talks about Amazon Prime and how, like, I'm gonna butcher the joke, but the bit is essentially like, we get everything when we want it, right? And I couldn't help but think of him in the middle of the pandemic when a singular light bulb went out in my loft, in my wife and my rental house, and I went to Amazon and I ordered a single light bulb for same day delivery, probably around 2 p.m. And they said they would get it to me by 10 p.m. And
Wow.
I felt so sick with myself for even doing that. It was such a luxurious action, and I don't know. It made me feel very gross, but I thought of him very much in that moment. He also had a small part in Shang-Chi. He was one of the hosts of the Fight Club. Looks totally different from like how he typically looks, but I think he pulled off the mohawk really well. I really dug it. And he was very funny in that part, even though it was brief. So yeah, I'm really excited to see his opinions about what we've been through the last couple of years and his new views of America at this point in time. So yeah, I cannot wait to watch it this week. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's
also, I know you haven't seen it. Highly recommend watching that first special.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'll check these out. That's Ronnie Chieng, Speakeasy, coming to Netflix this Tuesday. All right. Coming out this Friday, we have season 2 of a show called Woke on Hulu. I think I talked about this when it first came out. It's been a couple of years now, I think, but this is a comedy series co-created by Keith Knight and Marshall Todd and starring Lamorne Morris. So the plot of this is Keith Knight, creator of Toast and Butter, is a Black cartoonist on the verge of mainstream success. He prides himself on keeping it light and shies away from taking controversial stances. But after being racially profiled by an overly aggressive policeman, the traumatized Keith finds that he's able to see and hear inanimate objects talking to him, and becomes more sensitive to the issues of racism. So this is kind of based on the real life of Keith Knight, who has written comic strips such as The K Chronicles, Think, and The Nightlife. And this show, I blew through it in like a few days. It's relatively easy watching, really funny. I had kind of forgotten about it because it's been a couple of years. September 2020 is when it premiered. So year and a half. About a year and a half since it first premiered. And I'm really looking forward to this. I think I talked about it at the time, but if you haven't checked out season 1, check out season 1 on Hulu. I think it's maybe 8 or 10 episodes, relatively quick season, and definitely worth your time. That's Woke. That is coming. Season 2 is premiering on Friday on Hulu. Moving into some movies that are coming out this week. Something that we've talked about on the podcast before, Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Speaking of pre-pandemic media.
Oh my goodness, yes. This could have been the last movie you ever saw in a theater at one point, I think.
For many months, that's how it was, Brian.
Yes, so this is directed by Jeff Fowler and written by Pat Casey, Josh Miller, and John Whittington, and obviously based on the Sega franchise of the same name. It stars Ben Schwartz. He's returning as Sonic. It also has James Marsden, Tika Sumpter, Natasha Rothwell, Adam Pally, Shamar Moore, Colleen O'Shaughnessy, Idris Elba, and Jim Carrey. It follows Sonic and Tails teaming up to find the Master Emerald before Dr. Eggman and Knuckles can. I don't know too much about the lore of Sonic, but that's pretty much everything you need. You have Tails and you have Knuckles and you have mustachioed Jim Carrey as Dr. Eggman.
Yes.
What more do you want, Sonic fans? What more do you want? Aside from a new house on Zillow, which I'm sure they will advertise to us again.
Or an Olive Garden gift card.
Because when you're here, you're Sonic. Chris, are you going to be seeing Sonic the Hedgehog 2?
I am. In fact, I already have my tickets to go see Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Friend of the show, Danny Lopez, and I are going to go see it on opening day.
Nice.
Despite how much I rag on the first Sonic movie for almost being the last movie I ever saw in movie theaters, if the pandemic never allowed us to go back to movie theaters, I actually did really enjoy the movie. Jim Carrey is very much like back to basics when it comes to his comedy stylings. It feels very much like the roles that he used to play in the 90s. And I always love seeing that. Ben Schwartz, I think I've loved in every single thing that he's been in. He perfectly represents the energy of Sonic, and I think it was excellent casting. So I'm really excited to see where they go with this sequel. So far, I've heard that it's actually pretty good, you know, which is more than we can say about Morbius. Sorry, had to just a little dig there. I'm sorry.
Just can't stop yourself.
So yeah, I'm very excited to see Sonic 2. I'll report back maybe in our quick hits after I've seen it, and I'll let you guys know what I thought.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that.
Brian, are you going to see this movie?
Of course. I enjoyed the first movie as well. Yeah, I'll definitely be checking this out. I'm not sure if I'll be able to see it before the next episode, but we'll see. So that's Sonic the Hedgehog 2. That'll be out in theaters this Friday. Now, the return of Michael Bay. We have Ambulance also coming to theaters this Friday. This is based on the 2005 Danish film of the same name by Laurits Munch Peterson. And and as well as Lars Andreas Peterson. And the film stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, and Asa Gonzalez, and follows two adoptive siblings turned bank robbers who hijack an ambulance and take two first responders hostage. Classic, just exciting, ludicrous premise. This trailer, the first trailer for this in particular, I was immediately sold on this movie. I'm not expecting it to be any revelation on humanity, to be particularly profound, but I know there's going to be insane action shots, plenty of explosions, and a lot of ridiculous dialogue seriously delivered in a way that's going to make me laugh my ass off. I haven't
Hopefully no statutory rape jokes. That would be great. If we
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I don't even know what you're referring to here.
I think it was the first Transformers movie with Mark Wahlberg that there was like a whole fucking conversation of. Let's not get into it.
Yikes. Okay. Well, hopefully not. This is written by Chris Fedek, and yeah, got a great cast. Got Michael Bay going to be doing what is aptly termed Bayhem, and yeah. I know you're not going to be seeing this one, Chris, but I'll definitely tell you how it is once I do see it.
I can't wait to hear.
Another thing that's coming out in theaters this week, it had a limited release a week or two ago, but it's getting a full release now, is Everything Everywhere All at Once. This is a film written and directed by Dan Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, and stars Michelle Yeoh, Ki Hui Kwan, Stephanie Zhu, Jenny Slate, Harry Shum Jr., James Hong, and Jamie Lee Curtis, and follows a Chinese-American woman who must retain herself through her counterparts throughout the multiverse while balancing tenuous relationships in her own family. This looks kind of like Sense8 meets the MCU or something. Wide-ranging. I've heard it described as maximalist cinema. This looks very much up my alley conceptually and visually, and critically, I've heard only great things. So I am super excited to see this movie. Have you seen? You've obviously seen the trailer for this, Chris. Are you planning on checking out Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Absolutely. This is super high on my priority list. We have a lot of movies coming out here in the next couple of weeks, and some of which we're going to be talking about here on the podcast.
They're finally back after the Batman. This is the first week where it's like, oh, people are releasing movies again.
Yeah,
this is great.
There are many choices, not just one thing. So like you said, Brian, I haven't heard anything negative about this film. And Michelle Yeoh is just a badass in everything. The trailer looks awesome. So as soon as I can, I really do want to see this movie in theaters.
Yeah, same. We'll definitely be talking about this one in quick hits at some point. So that's Everything Everywhere All at Once by the Daniels, coming out this Friday in wide release. Last, I feel like we've talked about this exact movie a week or two ago. This falls into that very generic. You've definitely seen this movie before, but there may be some different faces in it. We've got All the Old Knives coming to Prime Video this Friday.
What did you say about was it The Contractor a couple of weeks ago? Pleasantly generic. Is that how you describe it?
Something like that.
Something like that.
And I think that's probably accurate. I haven't watched that movie, but the plot of this, when the CIA discovers one of its agents leaked information that cost more than 100 people their lives, veteran operative Henry Pelham is assigned to root out the mole with his former lover and colleague, Celia Harrison. So this is directed by Janice Metz Peterson and written by Olin Steinhauer and stars Chris Pine, Lawrence Fishburne, Jonathan Pryce, and Thandaway Newton. I apologize about pronunciation there. And it'll be on Amazon it'll be on Amazon Prime this Friday. This trailer, as I said, it looks like your generic, slightly sexy thriller, CIA espionage. Who can you trust? You can't trust anyone, even if you're sleeping with them. This is how it always is. And you know what you're getting into with this sort of movie, but I hope it's good. It's got some good people in it. So that is All the Old Knives coming to Prime Video this Friday. And that finally wraps it up for the news this week.
Brian, you did it. There were emotional highs, there were emotional lows. It was a big one, but we still managed to deliver the wackiest of news to our listeners and viewers. So thank you. With that, we're going to waste no time and we're going to move right in to the Pop-O-Holics community feedback section. Welcome back to the Pop-O-Holics community feedback section, loyal listeners and viewers. In this section, we always take care of some housekeeping for the Pop-O-Holics. We go over our upcoming Throwback Thursday episode over on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Pop-O-Holics for our audio-only listeners. We'll go over any poll results that we have. We did not release a poll this week, so we don't have any results. And then if you go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts app, rate us 5 stars and write a review. We will always read that review here in this section. So head on over to either of those platforms and leave us a 5-star review. Write anything you want. We'd be happy to read it here on the show. But we are going to talk about our Throwback Thursday episode here. We have wrapped up our November 2019 release with last week was Ratatouille, right? And I don't know, Brian, if you remember what was happening in December of 2019, but there's a big movie coming out.
Everyone loved.
Everyone loved it. And it's not like I've spent, months belittling this movie since it's released every once in a while here on the podcast. But in December of 2019, The Rise of Skywalker came out to conclude what Disney had dubbed the Skywalker saga. So
the Emperor lives somehow.
The dead speak. We're not going to rag on that movie here. It'll take way too much time and I'll just get angry. So this week on our Throwback Thursday episode on our YouTube channel, we are going to be talking about Star Wars, the prequel trilogy. Over the next couple weeks, we're going to divvy up all the trilogies. We're going to talk about the prequel, then we'll talk about the original trilogy, and then we're going to talk about what had been released so far of the sequel trilogy and end it off with our review of The Rise of Skywalker. I remember having a blast with this month in 2019 up until the very end.
We haven't done this to ourselves in a while. We were crazy early on. I just got to say, we did some insane things in terms of
so many movies in the span of a week.
So many movies.
We don't do that anymore.
Well, we'll get back there. We'll make it happen again when maybe we have some more free time. But I got to say, in terms of the prequel trilogy, I think this is something that as I've gotten older, it's grown on me even more. I think I appreciate it more and more for how different it is in terms of the political intrigue elements and the fleshing out of the society, kind of casting doubt on the Jedi and the problems within their ranks, and obviously all of the stuff with the clones and the Clone Wars. I'm definitely excited to dig back into these at some point, and everyone should go and check out our opinions from 2019 before we rose.
Oh boy. Brian, you and I feel very similarly about the prequels, but we dive into it more thoroughly, as Brian mentioned, this coming Thursday on our YouTube channel. Loyal listeners, If you didn't know, we have a YouTube channel where you can see our faces instead of just listening to our beautiful voices. YouTube.com/Pop-O-Holics. Viewers, if you're already here watching us, please subscribe and click that notification bell. That way, when all of our episodes drop, you get notified on any of your device. You don't miss a single episode. And of course, remember to click that like button. Brian, with that, we're going to wrap up this half of the show, but when we come back, we're going to start our Easter Eggers month by talking about two of his early shorts. He directed a short adapting Hansel and Gretel and another short called Brothers. We'll talk about both when we come back on... Welcome back to Pop-O-Holics. In this half of the show, Brian and I are going to be starting our Easter Eggers month by talking about two of his shorts that he made in the early 2000s. The first being Hansel and Gretel, directed, like I said, by Robert Eggers, written by Robert Eggers, score by the first person, starring Luke Allison, Isabel Pease, and Kelly Eggers. And then the second short we're going to be talking about is called Brothers, again, directed by Robert Eggers, written by Robert Eggers, with cinematography by Jaron Blaschke, and then starring Ethan Saylor, Griffin Fox Smith, and Beth Brown. Both of these are no longer than 30 minutes. Hansel and Gretel is about 26 minutes, and Brothers, I think, comes in at roughly 17 minutes, if I'm
it may even be like 11.
Could be even less than that.
11 or 12. Yeah, it's pretty quick. Brothers seems to be, it's on Vimeo and YouTube, I believe. Hansel and Gretel, we found an archived copy. I'm not sure about the state of this in terms of you can find this online. We're not going to provide the links to this, but we were able to find it online. And Robert Eggers also did a short. His second short was The Telltale Heart,
which I'm sad that we could not find.
The Poe story, but he has said, I think it was in an AMA in around 2019, that he plans on putting it up at some point. Excellent. So that should be available at some point online too.
So the reason Brian and I wanted to talk about these before we go into our full-fledged Easter Eggers month is, to know a man, to really get to know him, you need to see where he came from, right? And both of these
see where the Eggers hatched.
Yeah, you got to see where the Eggers hatched. Oh, the dad jokes are flying. And I think both of these shorts are pretty representative of how he's evolved as a director over time. And we're going to talk more about that as the month goes on and we watch more of his movies. If you want to follow along with us, we'll be starting with The Witch next week, and then we're going to watch The Lighthouse, and then finally we're going to be watching his new release, The Northman. The man loves to put "thes" in his film titles.
Almost as much as he loves the woods.
Yes. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit on today's episode as well. But as we usually do, we're going to go over our non-spoiler thoughts of both of these projects. And then we'll get a little more spoilery as we talk about some of the standout moments. We're going to cover both of these at the same time, considering that they're so short. But we hope you guys enjoy. So without further ado, Brian, I'm going to kick it off with you. This month is something that you were really passionate about. You really wanted us to do this. Also, this is one of the best names I think that we've ever come up with in terms of naming a month.
This is Christian. We got to shout him out. He got a quick little bit at the beginning of the episode. He's going to be back next week for The Witch. But when he said Easter Eggers, there was no way we couldn't go back do this
from that point. Yeah, we absolutely had to do this.
He was like, I think he's like, is Easter in April? And we were like, what are you talking about? He's like, Easter Eggers. Incredible.
But with that, Brian, how did you enjoy watching these two shorts? How did you feel about them?
I did. It was especially leading into The Witch. I know you haven't seen The Witch yet, but it's so clear where his sensibilities lie and what he's interested in, and how from the very beginning of his film career he's been kind of diving into these things. The Witch, it's about a family alone in the woods as well, pretty much ostracized from their group of Christians that we'll talk about then. But yeah, it's always humbling to see someone that I consider to be an absolute auteur filmmaker who is incredible and has such obvious visual style and a certain way that he writes, and seeing his first movie and it being this very low budget, clearly like, I don't know if like student film is the right way to talk about it, but clearly very low budget and done with a relatively small cast and crew. But still seeing the core of what he would ultimately do there and where his influences are coming from. So I definitely really enjoyed this. And I will say, I think Brothers is a step above in nearly every way to Hansel and Gretel, not only being an original story, but just production design and the quality of the filmmaking being done. But you see it from Hansel and Gretel. And yeah, I'm excited to get into these.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say student film, Brian, when you are talking about Hansel and Gretel, because from the moment footage started playing on that short, I thought to myself, oh, I recognize these filters. This was made in 2006, 2007, which was roughly my first year in film school. And I, too, was taking contemporary footage and putting like film grain filters on it and making it black and white. And that's kind of the main thing that stuck out to me about this first short, Hansel and Gretel, is that it feels contemporary while trying to also be this kind of like silent film / expressionist piece,
Right.
And I think all of the daytime scenes in Hansel and Gretel unfortunately suffer from like being of the time, but the strength of this short, and you mentioned, he's a small cast. There are only, 3 or 4 people in the cast, and a relatively small crew, but bro, I have to shout out the set design and the costume work in all the scenes that take place in the witch's house. I mean, you like you said, you can see his vision blossoming in this short, and it will evolve and adapt and eventually become what we know him as now. But yeah, I couldn't help but like, I think you put it best. Humbling is the best way to look at it, because while watching this short, I was like, I used to try to make stuff like this when I was in film school as well. It felt very close to like what we were trying to do. It's definitely humbling in terms of looking at a man who, has come so far from that moment. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with Hansel and Gretel. You you were kind of blowing up the chat a little bit as you were watching it. It's been a little bit longer since you have read Hansel and Gretel, I guess it just wasn't as fresh in your mind. But yeah, this one was a lot a fun.
It's a dark story.
It is a very dark story. It's a Brothers Grimm story, which all of them are dark stories.
Right.
The Brothers Grimm are essentially meant to scare children into behaving. So they had to be dark and terrifying for, their function to work. But I'm sorry, you were going to say?
No. I just, in terms of just general opinions on Hansel and Gretel, I really liked the use. There was a lot of interesting handheld shots, and then most of it felt like it was handheld shots. And then you get some cool, I don't know if it's dolly stuff or what, but some like tracking shots in the woods that were happening. But I totally agree that. Go ahead.
The handheld stuff is actually what pulled me out of the short most.
Really?
Because, we watched Nosferatu a year ago. Mm-hmm. When it comes to these types of films, back in that era of filmmaking, there were no handheld movements. They were solid camera setups. So I honestly think maybe Eggers didn't think about that as he was trying to make this movie. And as an early filmmaker, I'm just going to be honest, that probably isn't something that I would have thought of either. I really, it's one of those like, we'll make it happen in post type of mentalities. We're like,
sure.
I know he worked and plays mostly before he got into film, but I think it was an oversight, to be perfectly honest. Single camera setups would have made it feel so much more like a traditional silent film.
Okay.
But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously this stuff is subjective. I'm in agreement that the stuff inside the house is definitely where it shines. Once we get the shadows, the darkness, there's kind of like some strange Dutch angle stuff, some interesting ways that he's composing shots. But yeah, the production design, especially in the witch's house, it's obviously low budget, but the way things are shot make it feel so effective still in a lot of ways. That's interesting about the handheld shots. I feel like there's something that even in something like The Witch, and I haven't watched it in a few years at this point. I'm excited to dig back into it. But with The Witch being kind of almost omniscient in some ways, sometimes the camera felt like another character, which I did appreciate for the handheld stuff, giving that kind of putting you on the ground there. But obviously, like you said, this was his first short film. He hasn't fully formed his style and his plans and thematically what's happening in a way that, especially getting into brothers, like you see he's on a whole other level after there's one film in between, and this is also a much tighter movie, which I think Hansel and Gretel could have been stronger if it was maybe 5 or 10 minutes shorter, even though it's only 25 minutes. Like you said, the parts prior to getting to the witch's house were probably the weakest. There was a moment though that I'll try and remember to bring up when we rewatch The Witch, but when the children are just like playing in this stream, and it's just like this really nice example of just kind of like childhood as well as the, familial love and play in that kind of like
kind
childlike
of
nature.
Slice of life moment.
That we get a similar moment in The Witch with two of our characters, and I'll try and remember to bring that up next week when we talk about that.
Okay, I'll try to remind you as well. How did you feel? What were your thoughts about Brothers?
Oh my God! So this was just super intense from start to finish. We start off with a slap boxing fight that progresses at some point, and I feel like my breath was held for the rest of the short. I feel like what's so great about this, especially coming off Hansel and Gretel, where we're cutting to dialogue cards, it's a silent film, there's music. And then in Brothers, it's nearly the opposite, where I don't think there's any score. It's just natural sound and dialogue. And it's just this intensity of this brotherly dynamic that is so fraught with pent up anger. We realize that they don't have parents. They're living with their grandmother. I thought it was their mother at first, but then it's revealed kind of that it's their grandmother. And there's so much said without saying anything. There's so much implication and tension that's built up. And it really just, this shows you who Robert Eggers is in a way that Hansel and Gretel doesn't. Like, this is where he's becoming a master at the craft, or getting there. There is some shots of just looking up at trees swaying, and there's this such ominous tension, but also beauty that's happening simultaneously.
The way the branches, that was one of the scenes that I was going to point out as like a standout sequence for me.
Yeah.
The way the branches kind of just like crack the skyline adds to this tension and intensity that is taking place between the two brothers.
100%. And we get what felt like, I don't know if it's a callback necessarily, but we see Hansel in Hansel and Gretel just pick up a stick and just hit trees around, just having fun, just like kind of that joyful destruction of youth kind of thing. And we get a very similar thing with the brothers, and then we see them sharpening it, and it becomes Chekhov's bayonet is what the note that I took. That's just absolutely perfect, and you're just being like, oh geez, what's going to happen from here? I don't know if this is like trampling on spoilers here. This is definitely worth watching. I was pretty impressed by this, and it showed me that this man obviously has vision. And I was really impressed with the cinematography. I think the acting was a step above here, although the writing is not on the level that I think he gets to, maybe. I think it's a good amount of dialogue, though. It's not overspoken. And nothing's laid out in a way that felt like it was overdone, and it leaves everything to implication, like I said. So I watched this right before bed and ended up doing a palate cleanse with Providence, which didn't necessarily help either.
What a chaser.
I know. But this one, I've been thinking about this one ever since, and it just kind of sticks with you and speaks to a lot of what it means to. I have two younger sisters, so I don't have this exact relationship, but seeing other people grow up with older brothers and stuff, I definitely can relate to and feel like there's truth in this short film that, was kind of haunting and resonant.
Yeah, Brian, I think you did a great job pretty much covering Brothers. I share a lot of the same opinions. Coming away from that short, all I said to you was that it was anxiety inducing. The tension, as you mentioned, is there from the start. And considering that it's such a short, especially compared to Hansel and Gretel, it's incredibly dense tension.
Yeah.
So you're kind of just living in this state of existence for the whole 10 minutes. And you can absolutely tell where it's building to. But having seen these two shorts, especially Brothers, as you mentioned, I'm way more interested to see these sensibilities expanded on in his feature films. So I'm very excited to watch The Witch next week. I think that's going to be a great experience. With that, we're going to jump right into spoilers, and we're going to talk a little more deeply about these. Like I said, they're not very long, so there's really not a whole lot to spoil. Hansel and Gretel is a 210-year-old story at this point in time. So like when we talked about Macbeth, you can't spoil something like that at this point in time. But do you have any moments that stand out to you between the two shorts that you want to dive more deeply into?
Early on in Hansel and Gretel, and I think it was a product of the stream not being incredible, but also, like you were saying, the filtering that's done. But there was something so creepy and effective about the witch looking through her looking glass or whatever, and just seeing her eye, her kind of like glaucoma, like glassy looking eye or whatever it is, just looking and moving around. There was something very creepy about the way he was shooting this and giving only like fractions of the body and really like doing slow reveals of who the witch is, what she looks like. So that really stuck with me immediately from that. Should we go back and forth? I don't know. I know you said you didn't have too many.
No, continue.
I thought there was a really cool transition when we see the house, the candy house at first, and I think there might be an edit hidden, but it was really perfectly done where it's one of these handheld shots where we walk in, it goes to black, and then we're inside the house. And I just thought it was a really perfect example of like, okay, this guy, he knows what he's doing, even though like the budget's not there. He's clearly got something, I felt
it's intelligent filmmaking,
very intelligent filmmaking for sure. And then I got big Wizard of Oz vibes, which I felt like were intentional with the way that the witch was dressed, not only when she was in full witch mode, but also prior. We saw her stockings, the
striped stockings, very traditional.
Stockings.
If someone says witch to you, the image that pops into your head, that's how they decided to dress this character.
100%. And the way that it ends with them sticking out from the oven, very reminiscent of the witch being crushed by the house. So I appreciated these little nods to kind of historical Hollywood. I think that was it for Hansel and Gretel for me. Did you have any from Hansel and Gretel?
As I mentioned earlier, no real standout moments to me. I was familiar with the story, so like I knew exactly what was happening. But seriously, just to reiterate, the production design on the second half of that short is really, quite impressive for someone who's not a student filmmaker at the time, but like who's a newer filmmaker, So I just want to reiterate that that's definitely the strongest part of the whole short. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, in Brothers, the scene in which they are just looking up at the sky and he's shooting the tree line is one of the most beautiful shots in that whole short. I personally was more of a fan of Hansel and Gretel only because, again, the dense tension in Brothers. And that's not a commentary on the quality of the short. That's solely like a personal preference in the state of mind that, art puts you in, But Get ready for brothers to change your mood.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of gave away my favorite brother scene as well. It may have been pseudo spoilery, but just them going to hitting the trees and then sharpening them, making the bayonets. I thought they were BB guns at first. I don't know. Did you immediately know that they were?
No,
were
I initially
real
thought they were
guns?
BB guns as well.
Okay.
And that just added to the drama toward the end when he
Oh
shoots
my
his brother,
gosh.
when the younger brother shoots the older brother. Or did he
Well,
stab him?
He stabs him, and then the brother goes to shoot him, and I think his gun backfires.
Oh, it was
and he
so quick
shoots
I couldn't even
himself.
tell.
I'll have to go back and look, but he definitely stabs him at first and starts immediately apologizing, and then the brother aims, I think pulls the trigger, and then he shoots himself. Something like
Okay.
backfires with his gun.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that whole build up to that with him telling him to like shooting with his back to him, putting the teddy bear back up, and like just such a perfect, example of lost childhood, or this sort of perfect thematic thing, them shooting this teddy bear with guns, him trying to impress his older brother, rolling his cigarettes for him, which was really sweet. It was just kind of this like understated thing that he did where he wasn't smoking the cigarettes with him, but he would roll them for him, and it was just kind of this bond that they had, even though there's all this tension there.
Right. He's also not very good at it. I'm just going to say that.
Well, I mean, okay, all right. He's got time to learn. His brother seemed to appreciate it, even though he didn't show his
he did.
appreciation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's interesting that you liked Hansel and Gretel more. All right, well, strap in, Chris. Where the tension is ratcheting up from here. So
I can't wait. These are all going to have to be midday viewings going forward, just to ensure that I can sleep later on. Brian, is there anything else you'd like to add about either of these shorts before we wrap it up here?
I think that's about it. Happy Easter eggers, everyone. We are getting started, and we're going to have an awesome month ahead that's going to end with The Northman. My gosh, this movie looks epic and insane. I can't wait to rewatch The Witch. And then I've only seen The Lighthouse once in theaters, so I'm super excited to rewatch that. I definitely recommend it with subs, Chris, by the way. If you don't typically watch with subs, if you guys are planning to watch that along with us, half of that movie is nearly indecipherable at times.
I can't wait.
It's so good.
All right, loyal listeners and viewers, with that, we're going to close out this episode of Pop-O-Holics. Thank you so much for spending time with us. We hope you have fun with Easter Eggers, rewatching all of his movies with us over the course of the next month. Brian, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at True Pop-O-Holic.
And you can find me on Twitter at Chris Conkling, talking about all things nerdy, comic books, video games, television, movies, collectibles. If it's nerdy, I'm talking about it. And then, of course, you can find Pop-O-Holics on Twitter at Pop-O-Holics. We're on Instagram at Pop-O-Holicscast. You can email us at popaholicscast@gmail.com. Send us your feedback about episodes. Tell us how wrong we are about our opinions. Tell us that you agree with us. If you want to recommend a guest to come on the show or a topic you'd like for us to cover in the future, you can email us there. And that's going to do it. We'll see you guys next time on...